This is English shorthand dictation number 176 and the dictation speed is 120 words per minute. Ready? Start. Mr. Chairman, my purpose in rising to address this conference is principally to place before it the point of view of the depressed classes regarding the question of constitutional reform. It is a point of view of 1/5 of the total population of British India. The depressed classes form a group by themselves which is distinct and separate from the Muslims. Although they are included among the Hindus, they do not form an integral part of that community in any sense. They have not only a separate existence, but they have also assigned to them a statute which is invidiously distinct from the status occupied by any other community in India. There are communities in India which occupy a lower and subordinate position, but the position assigned to the depressed classes is totally different. It is one which is midway between that of the serf and the slave, and which may be called servile, with the difference that the serf and the slave were permitted to have physical contact, from which the depressed classes are debarred. What is worse is that this enforced servility and bar to human intercourse involves not merely the possibility of discrimination in public life, but actually works out as a positive denial of all equality of opportunity and the denial of those most elementary of civic rights on which all human existence depends. I am sure that the point of view of such a community as large as the population of England or France, and so heavily handicapped in the struggle for existence, cannot but have some bearing on the right sort of solution of the political problem. I am anxious that this conference should be placed in possession of that point of view at the very start. The point of view I am trying to put is that the bureaucratic form of government in India should be replaced by a government which will be a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. I am sure this statement of the view of the depressed classes will be received with some surprise in certain quarters. The tie that bounds the depressed classes to the British has been of a unique character. The depressed classes welcomed the British as their deliverers from age-long tyranny and oppression by the orthodox Hindus. They fought their battles against the Hindus, the Muslims, and the Sikhs, and won for them this great empire of India. The British, on their side, assumed the role of trustees for the depressed classes. In view of such an intimate relationship between the parties, this change in the attitude of the depressed classes towards British rule in India is undoubtedly a most momentous phenomenon. But the reasons for this change of attitude are not far to seek. We have not taken this decision simply because we wish to throw in our lot with the majority. As you know, there is not much love lost between the majority and the particular minority I represent. Ours is an independent decision. We have judged the existing administration solely in the light of our own circumstances, and we have found it wanting in some of the most essential elements of a good government. When we compare our present position with the one we had in Indian society of the pre-British days, we find that instead of marching on, we are only marking time. Before the British, we were in the hateful condition due to our untouchability. Has the British government done anything to remove it? Before the British, we could not enter the temple. Can we enter now? Before the British, we were denied entry into the police force. Does the British government admit us in the force? Before the British, we were not allowed to serve in the military. Is that career now open to us? To none of these questions can we give an affirmative answer. We acknowledge that the British, who have ruled us for such a long time, have done some good. But there is certainly no fundamental change in our position. So far as we were concerned, the British government has accepted the social arrangements as it found them and has preserved them faithfully in the manner of the Chinese tailor who, when given an old coat as a pattern, produced with pride an exact replica. Our wrongs have remained as open source, and they have not been righted, although 150 years of British rule have rolled away. We do not accuse the British of indifference or want of sympathy. What we do find is that they are quite incompetent to tackle our problems. If the case was one of indifference only, it would have been a matter of small moment, and it would not have made such a profound change in our attitude. But what we have come to realize on a deeper analysis of the situation is that it is not merely a case of indifference. Rather, it is a case of sheer incompetence to undertake the task. The depressed classes find that the British government in India suffers from two very serious limitations. There is, first of all, an internal limitation which arises from the character, motives, and interests of those who are in power. It is not because they cannot help us in these things, but because it is against their character, motives, and interests to do so. The second consideration that limits its authority is the mortal fear it has of external resistance. The government of India does realize the necessity of removing the social evils which are eating into the vitals of Indian society and which have blighted the lives of the downtrodden classes for so many years. The government of India does realize that the landlords are squeezing the masses dry and the capitalists are not giving the laborers a living wage and decent conditions of work. Yet it is most painful thing that it has not dared to touch any of these evils. Is it because it has no legal powers to remove them? That is not the case. The reason why it does not intervene is because it is afraid that its intervention to amend the existing code of social and economic life will give rise to resistance. How good is such a government to anybody? We must have a government in which the men in power will give their undivided allegiance to the best interest of the country. We must have a government in which men in power, knowing where obedience will end and resistance will begin, will not be afraid to amend the social and economic code of life which the dictates of justice and expediency so urgently call for. The British government will never be able to play this role. It is only a government which is of the people, for the people, and by the people that will make this possible. These are some of the questions raised by the depressed classes who have come to the inevitable conclusion that the bureaucratic government of India, with the best of motives, will remain powerless to effect any change so far as our particular grievances are concerned.